Oof, the way that narcissistic family systems, the family members, the relatives, twist accountability around and puts the responsibility on the abuse victim's shoulders, usually the scapegoat, and none on themselves or on the actual abuser. What brings this to mind? This comment. Let's get into it, shall we? This made me want to cry. I have been told by members of my family that we are all responsible for our own choices, and that hurt me so much because what choice did I have as a little girl? What power did I have to protect myself? And yet they can't see that they as adults made the choice to leave me in her care alone, knowing I was being abused because they cared more about the drama it would create for them rather than the damage it was causing me. Thank you so much. Seeing you as a little girl in that picture reminded me that I was also a little girl, innocent, deserving of love, and not at fault for the abuse I endured every single day. So I ran away from home a lot, like a lot, which was great for my mother because it made me look like the problem child and the rebellious child and all that. I ended up living on the streets. When I was 13 years old, it stuck. And I grew myself up off the streets, and at 17, I had my little baby girl. Social services sent me back to my mother and the relatives, no questions asked, with the pressure of, how are you going to provide for your baby, insinuating they would take my baby away if I didn't go back. Plus, my mother used the words, I love you and I miss you and I want you to come home. And that's everything I've ever wanted to hear from her. I mean, I can't remember times that she said she loved me, let alone that she missed me. So all that to be said, I get back, and within moments, it was all about the choice I made, and look what I did to the family, and how dare I hurt everybody else. Children who are being abused in these family systems are treated like they are responsible for what's happening to them and the choices that they're making when they literally have no choice. And so these people, when we grow into adults, these people in these systems, I'm like, when I think about it, they take something that is not incorrect and they use it in a way that is furthering the victim shaming, blaming, and is actually abusive and toxic. And it's very difficult when you, especially if you haven't gone to therapy or anything like that, not to really take that to heart and be like, yeah, I was the bad one. I deserve to be abused. First of all, we're taught that, right? That's how the narcissistic abusers keep us locked in, by making sure that we know, everybody knows that we're damaged goods and whatever the words are. My mother liked damaged goods. That was her favorite. Tramp was another one. I was like 9 years old being CSA'd when she was calling me that. So we grow up knowing that it's our fault, our responsibility, and that we're choosing to do bad things that bring bad things on us, even though we're very likely being I'll speak for myself. I was a total fawn freeze girl. Go along to get along, monitor my environment, morph into agreeing with whatever is going on in it, and trying to stay under the radar, hoping to be invisible as much as humanly possible. So anyway, now I'm back in the family fold, with the relatives, being blamed for running away from the mother that they knew was abusing me and the grandfather and grandmother that they were in denial about, because there was CSA going on there, being told what a horrible person I am and how could I choose to do this to the family. Those were the words. How could I choose to do this to the family? The same family that wasn't rescuing me or helping me. And you're right about the whole drama thing, because as long as they can focus on the bad one, they don't have to take any accountability for their own lives and what's going on there. And many of the other family members are also abusive to their children. There isn't usually just one NPD person. With my mother, it's a sociopath and NPD. There isn't usually just one. And if you start to look back and think about different behaviors, I bet you can then go, oh, yeah, I didn't see that before. And that took some years in the making to start putting all the pieces of the puzzle together, because they kind of work like a puzzle. a broken puzzle with pieces missing, but they do work as a puzzle. And when the scapegoat escapes, that's a big piece missing. They replace the scapegoat. Just so you know, somebody else has taken your place, and hopefully they escape as well. Back to the responsibility of it. So fast forward a few years later, I'm not in therapy yet. I'm dating who became my husband, who I was with for quite some time, and he's a great guy, and we just grew apart and all that. So thank goodness he's a great dad to my kids who are adults now and all that sort of thing. He really grew me up. He was 13 years older when we got together, and he really helped to support my healing and my journey and pointing things out of, it isn't you. You were a little girl. He was the one who showed me the picture of me in a way. And it was right around that time that I started creating boundaries. And my mother obviously didn't like that. It's also right around that time that I ended up going no contact with her, not knowing it would be 30 years. And she would say things to me like, you walk around with a chip on your shoulder and you need to be responsible for your own choices. I mean, 17 and having a baby, how could you? And all that. And that baby was her golden child, but she also used that to punish me and be like, everybody knows, like, you've been around, and like those kinds of things. So I'm 17 and so vulnerable, a trauma survivor, and my mother is blaming me for my choices that I'm supposed to be responsible for. And the world tells us we're responsible for our choices. It's just not in that way. It's not supposed to mean that. At some point, we do have to hold ourselves accountable for seeking healing, for doing better for ourselves. At some point, that is a good decision. And when we break away from that system, that's usually when we're really able to do it at the highest level. It doesn't mean that no contact has to be permanent. Not every single situation is the same. So for anyone out there going, oh, you're telling people go no contact, I don't tell people that. I am a therapist. I give people the tools to figure out what works best for them. It isn't my job to tell somebody or make decisions for somebody else. So anyway, and if this seems a little bit choppy, it's because I made a section of video and it got corrupted. So I apologize in advance for the flow that might not be there in this particular video. Anyhow, I'm setting boundaries with regard to my mother, and they're not even boundaries for me, they're boundaries for my children. I have 2 children at this point. She's treating one like the golden child, the other one like they're non-existent, not even as the scapegoat, probably because she knew she wouldn't get away with taking things that far. And I was creating boundaries around the way that she behaved towards me in front of my children, the way she behaved between the 2 of them, things that she was doing that were really detrimental, like telling my then, 4 or 5-year-old daughter to lie to me and hide things while building a special relationship. And the things that she was telling her to hide were like, she had her watching Poltergeist. And I found out because, of course, my little girl had a nightmare that night and threw her toxic grandmother under the bus, so I was creating boundaries around that to protect my children. I didn't yet have the ability to protect myself, and I didn't yet understand that I deserved to protect myself. I still thought that I deserved how my mother treated me, even though my ex-husband, boyfriend at the time, was trying to bring into light that it was my mother and not me. So it was all kind of these moving pieces of getting some clarity while being still set on fire. Kind of difficult to do. My mother writes me a love letter, or I should say a love letter, and it starts Marnie. Not hi Marnie, not dear Marnie, not Marnie my daughter, nothing like that, just Marnie. And that in and of itself was odd, because when my mother had sent me like postcards when I was a little girl in summer camp, couple of postcards, don't get excited folks, it didn't happen very often. It was her way of reminding me she was still out there and still abusing me. Like the cards were, I'll actually include one at the end of this so that you can get a flavor, but I had no name, I was just a dash. So and the one I'll include at the end of the video is from when I was 11 years old, just for context. Anywho, She's Marnie. I will not be the blame, a part of your process of blaming for where your life is now, and proceeds to tell me that I need to take accountability and responsibility and all these things, and how bad I am, and how none of this is her fault. Like, there's no accountability. And that's how it always, and I do not like absolutes, but that is how it always, I just negated that statement. But anyway, and again, it is always our fault. Because as long as somebody isn't willing to take any accountability for what they did to you, they're telling you you're the one who's accountable. And in these narcissistic family systems, they don't insinuate it, they do it out loud. And then they wonder why we don't want to be in relationships with them anymore. They wonder why we don't speak to anyone. Well, maybe because you're not willing to see us, create safety for us, and show us that you actually cherish and value us. You don't have to agree with everything. But can we agree that in the power dynamic, the bigger person was never behaving like the bigger person, and the little person had no choice or power in the situation whatsoever? And that you doubling down that it's our responsibility to take care of everything always, and our choices, if they're bad, it's because it's our fault, not what we were taught we were worth, not because we were doing the love that we know, not because the role models were absolute pieces of garbage. It's all our fault. Like, what the actual, F. I appreciate your comment. I know, little tangent there, but it's that thing that everybody acts so shocked when we don't want to be engaged in relationships with people who don't value us. And yet they want us to take accountability for our lives, but not really. Part of the accountability is creating enough distance, whatever that looks like, to be able to start healing and gain perspective so that we can make better life decisions now that we actually have the power to do so. Thank you so much for the comment. I clearly relate to it so much. And I know a lot of other people will too. So that's why I wanted to share it.